Hello, dear beloveds. I am so delighted to be here with you. I really am excited about this one because I had a lovely comment from a beautiful woman called Kelsey Bell who asked a question on one of my videos. It was a comment saying, there may be a post explaining this. Is there a post on how you started your school? And she was watching a video on, I think that one was on the Hermetic laws. And of course I went, oh golly, I don't actually remember talking about the origin of the Institute for a really long time. So of course, those of you who've read Spiritually Fierce will know a lot of the story. I included in there how there was one kind of event that really started the Institute off, but I think I'd love to spend a little bit of time putting the Institute's evolution into a context, which of course is my own evolution. And how did my journey to wanting to become an intuition expert and wanting to, connect everybody on the planet to their intuitive intelligence begin, and why the Institute's the best way to do that. So I'm really grateful to Kelsey for that opportunity, and we're going to have a little walk back through time, and we're going to have a opportunity to, I guess, get to know me a little bit better and to get to understand why intuition matters to me, and why, of all the things that I have studied and learned and experienced in my life as a spiritual seeker, why was it that intuition is the one that I went, that's it, that's what I got to stay with, that's what I need to bring more of into the world. And so I'm going to do it. We're going to go back in time. If there was a little kind of effect on the camera right now, I'd add it. Oh, when I sit back it looks a bit different. So my spiritual journey began really around the time of my birth, which sounds ridiculous, but I was born to an amazing woman called Angelique, who has been a spiritual seeker all of my life. So she raised me to understand things that for other people were either, I guess, strange or unusual, were very, very normal to me. And I remember even as a young child, being taken to events and falling asleep often under the chairs, but where her friends and her community would sit with amazing channels and, experiencing meditation and being part of a spiritual community from very early on in my life. And we traveled a lot. So it wasn't like we were, raised inside one spiritual community, but my constant was my mum. And her spirituality is a very deep kind of classical spirituality. I got to read a lot of the really foundational texts of the contemporary spiritual seeker, and got to go very deep into what I consider to be, ancient wisdom and a deep grounding in a classical spirituality. When I was around 15, I went and did my first Reiki training, and I got to sort of learn and understand more independently about understanding the way energy works. And when I left, I actually can't remember if I'd left uni. Yeah, after I'd finished uni, I did a theatre degree. That's another story. I really wanted to be Kate Winslet. That was my primary goal when I was about 18. And I went off and did a transpersonal counselling diploma with Icon Institute in Fremantle. And that was another phase of understanding and deepening into my own personal journey with my spirituality. And it just continued like that for me. I've always channeled, I've always obviously meditated, combined with all the things that young people tend to do. But when I got to Melbourne, that was sort of my mid-20s. That was the first time I stepped into a teaching role, and I set up a business called the Divine Sisterhood. And basically what I did was work at a crystal shop on Lygon Street, Crystal Heart, a very beautiful crystal shop. And I did one-on-one readings in the back of the shop. And it was really like an apprenticeship. It was, people who come into that sort of environment are generally looking for the answers to their life to be solved for them. They don't want to take responsibility for the big, gnarly, difficult stages of their life. And they're usually either really curious and playful, or they're in a deep state of crisis. And I did that for, I can't even remember how long, but at least a couple of years. And so, really saw hundreds and hundreds of people in all different states of their life. And at the same time, I started my first teaching role, which was a 6-month program to train women as psychic readers like me. I called myself a psychic at the time because it worked. I was a psychic reader in a shop and everybody understood what that meant. And it also worked because psychic means of the soul. So that was a really interesting time for me, because at the same time, I was doing my PhD at Melbourne University. So I really have always had a foot in both worlds, if you like. I really want to attain knowledge in all its forms. I find learning to be deeply exciting, and I never will stop wanting to learn more. But I was doing a PhD in magical realism, and the reason I was studying magical realism is because I wanted a PhD from Australia's best university, and I didn't want to have a kind of, I didn't want to have a qualification that people would go, oh, well, that's not a real PhD, because it was like the Psychic Institute of Metaphysical Studies or something like that, which at this point in time in our world people do malign. I see a future where that will not be the case, and I hope the Institute will one day be the kind of organisation that can qualify people in PhDs in metaphysical studies that are respected as much as a PhD from Melbourne University. We're not at that stage yet, but I'm hoping to lead that charge. And that's why my grounding as an academic is very much influences the structure of the Institute and how I've set it all up. I want that, you have to come into a foundation program. Everybody has to do that foundation program so that all the learners in that space have that same awareness, that same knowledge. You then do an undergraduate program, and then there's the possibility of a postgraduate program. And that will only continue to grow as the Institute grows. And that's very much coming out of my academic training. What I studied was magical realism, and magical realism was a choice because it was my way of speaking about my spirituality inside of this Ivory Tower Institute and kind of getting away with it. Magical realism, if you don't know, is a literary genre that also shows up in art, visual art as well, but is largely a literary genre, which is a language, it's a post-colonial discourse. It speaks from the margin to the center to destabilize meaning. What that basically means in terms of my spirituality, because my spirituality is a spiritual activism, it's designed to get us to question, to look at the current paradigm structures and to question them, and to question the paradigm structures that we've inherited through a superficial spirituality, and to dismantle all of that so that we're actually having an unmediated relationship with our own infinite consciousness. So magical realism had a lot of tropes and qualities about it that allowed me to speak about my spirituality inside of that organization. The vision I had for myself is that I would go on and become an academic. I really didn't think that I would step outside of that, because I really love those Ivory Tower institutions. I really love learning, as I mentioned, and I love teaching, crazy love teaching. Anyway, God, the infinite, had different plans. Thank God. I had different plans. And basically all the avenues into that academic life that I thought was going to be my future closed down. And I kind of went through that. Well, why did I do the PhD? What was all of that about? But of course, now I can see it was in preparation for me to establish my own training institute. And my mandate is to really lead the revolution in excellence in the intuitive sciences, so that when you do one day you can qualify with a doctorate in intuitive intelligence, that will be widely respected. That future's coming, I have no doubt, and what I'm doing now is laying the groundwork for that. I've had a number of people say to me they come into the program quite delighted that the prospectus and the handbook and all of the materials that you get are really, really robust. So we know what our plan is. You know when your lectures are going to be. You know what the timing of things is. You know what your learning outcomes are. And once again, this is all replicating that high-level academic model, not because I want to have a staid and kind of, stale learning environment, but because to acquire excellence, we have to be unafraid to take from the mainstream what works to make what we do better. And that's what I believe is possible when we bring those things together, not to replicate the systems of power that keep people away from their own power, but actually what keeps us wedded to our power. And those sorts of organizations, high-level pedagogy, having a really deep understanding of how to transfer knowledge to people in a way that is sustainable and going to alter lives. That's what I'm all about. So that's why I created an institute. Why was it that I wanted to focus on intuition? To me, intuition is God speaking to us. It's the infinite intelligence communing with us. It's the language of the soul. And we are all innately intuitive. It's so obvious that that's the case, I don't even talk about that anymore, because it's just a truth universally acknowledged, and if it isn't, we should all get on board with that. What I'm excited about doing is taking those women who are ready to move beyond the trinkets and superstitions of the New Age ghetto, all of the things you can buy to supposedly increase your intuition, to have an unmediated relationship with God, or that infinite one mind. That is what I do. My job is to take away the limiting beliefs, the things that are keeping you actually in another system of religion. So it really doesn't matter what your beliefs are. If they're man-made and they're about you having to do something at a particular time and get someone else's permission, or get a particular crystal, or get a particular oracle deck, you might as well still be in the Catholic Church, or you might as well still be part of any man-made religion, because you've just replaced one dogma with another. And I am constantly amazed at how dogmatic, open-minded, free-thinking spiritual people will be, because we're actually terrified of meeting ourselves as God. So we always try to put something between us and God. We always try, until we get comfortable with being God ourselves, or that infinite consciousness, we will try to put rules, or brules, to use Vishen Lakhiani's term, bullshit rules, between us and God. Because what would it mean if I actually was God? The power, the responsibility is so terrifying for people that they will default to their trinkets and superstitions, and those things that, oh, well, this is what a good spiritual person does, and this is what we do, and this is the only way that we do this, and if you don't do it this way, then you're not a good spiritual person. My mandate is to take women beyond the bullshit beliefs to meet themselves as God in an unlimited way. And that absolutely requires us to be unafraid of our own power. Intuition, I believe, in its living, breathing form. So if you think of intuition as a latent skill inside all of us, to turn it into a living, breathing form, I call that intuitive intelligence. And that requires that you trust yourself, and you trust God, and you trust your own power. And that system of intuitive intelligence doesn't just go on like that. You have to work for it. And the way that you work for it is through the systems of meeting and clearing your own fear. Devotion and spiritual fierceness. And these are the things that activate intuitive intelligence, that actually turn your intuition on. So it isn't enough to just know that you're intuitive. It's vital that we devote ourselves to the knowledge and the experiences and the tools that will turn that intuitive intelligence into a living, breathing system where we don't doubt it. We don't question it. We don't wait when an intuition hits us. We do not even need to ask a question, because we live in a constant state of communion with that God mind, or that infinite consciousness that we are all a part of. This is what the field is. The one mind of God is what we call the divine matrix, or the quantum field. So intuition to me is simply our innate superpower that we must, if we want to live a fully realized, fully optimized, fully, empowered, fully self-reliant life, turn on. And we have to be willing to turn it on in a non-negotiable way. And that's why the entry point into the Institute is the Initiate program. This 12-week program is 100% designed to switch intuition into its living, breathing form, which is intuitive intelligence. And that's when your intuition stops being a party trick. That's when it stops being the psychic reader at the shop. That's when it stops being asking your pendulum a question. And it becomes a constant union with the God mind that you are, an unmediated relationship with your power, with your spiritual power. And if you are interested in not having a negotiable relationship with your intuition, and therefore with God, then these tools in this program is where you need to be. And that's why it's the entry point to my Institute. You cannot go further into the Institute, no matter how woke you are, no matter how many spiritual programs you've done, no matter how awakened you believe you are. This knowledge is vital. And a good student knows that they can never hear this information too often. There's so much of what we've replicated from the mainstream that doesn't serve us as spiritual seekers. This kind of linearity, this ladder climbing approach, this idea that our ego will have us believe that we're more awake and more aware than someone else, and therefore we don't need to, study the foundations of spirituality. But most people never got a classical spirituality. Most people were initiated into a superficial spirituality, which was about how do you give your power away to something outside of yourself. And this is the antithesis of that program. This is the self-reliant, self-initiated, self-sovereigning spiritual seeker. And to me, this is absolutely the state of being that we all need to inhabit now if we want to free the world. So why intuition? all of those reasons, and because when we are connected to our intuitive intelligence, we rehumanize our heart, to use Layla Saad's term, and we will no longer permit the conditions of suffering that are encompassing the world in such a horrific way right now. We become spiritual activists by turning on our intuition. We become socially conscious by turning on our intuition, because suddenly we are one with the God mind, and we could not want to let suffering continue for another, and we would not for 1 second believe that it's out there that we make the change. So stepping into union or right relationship with the self is what happens when we turn on our intuitive intelligence, and it's a very, very exciting thing to see happen. I warn people in Spiritually Fierce that when you pursue this path of intuitive intelligence, of being the self-initiated, self-reliant, self-sovereigning initiate, then do be careful, because the things that you will want for your life will change, and you will no longer want to pursue a life of vision boards and manifesting crap for yourself and just making your own little piece of the world better. You will automatically begin to see the world in oneness, and that unified consciousness will rehumanize your heart, and you will want to pursue things that are in accordance with the greater good of all. We call this sacred service. So ultimately for me, intuition is what will save the world, because when we're connected to it, we are connected to what we truly are, which is that infinite one mind. So thank you, Kelsey, for the prompt to make this video and to share with you what intuition is to me and why I created the Institute. And joyfully, the Initiate program is opening again for a fully guided round. That means that you get 12 small group mentoring sessions with me over 3 months, along with an incredible program of lectures and tools that will change your life. It's also the prerequisite for the 3rd level. So if you are interested in going to the next level with the Institute, this foundation program, remember, not a beginner's program. I'm not telling you that you're a baby spiritual seeker. I simply know that there are gaps and absences in most people's learning, but also that we need to rehear this knowledge and information as often as we can, because we need to train our consciousness upon it. The cart opens for that program on the 20th or 21st of August. It's only open for 10 days. If you want to spend some more time with me, I'll share the links to that, but also a free training that I'm offering next Monday night on the Hermetic laws. This is one of the cornerstones of the Initiate program, and vital knowledge that we should all have been initiated into and have not yet been. So if you find yourself saying things like, God's teaching me a lesson, or the universe wants me to know something and that's why that shit thing happened to me, then you really need to come and do this free training with me on Monday night, because that's simply not true. God is not teaching you a lesson. In fact, quite the opposite is the truth. And when we understand the true cosmic laws of how things are actually ordered and organized, we'll stop saying dumbass things like God's trying to teach me a lesson. God is not interested in teaching you a lesson or anything else like that, but you have to join me to find out why. So I'll share the link to that as well. If you want to know anything about the Initiate program, please do let me know. This program is just my life. I love this program. I used to travel around Australia teaching this in 2 days. It simply was not enough time, so we've turned it into a 12-week online program, but it is the only way to get small group mentoring with me, to spend any time with me, in fact, that isn't part of the 3rd level. So if that is calling you, then please don't hesitate. That will be coming back. September 7 is when the program starts. The cart opens on the 21st of August for just 10 days. And if you are considering the 3rd level, then you need to be part of this round of the Initiate program to be eligible for our 2019 intake. Okay, thank you again, Kelsey. I love talking about why this has come into being and what it is that the Institute stands for. Intuition is what will save the world, and it's our job to not just know we're intuitive, but to move into the living, breathing system of intuition, which is intuitive intelligence. And thanks for all the love, Anna. You're gorgeous. Have a beautiful day.